The mess hall of the Galactic Joint Officer Academy hummed with a dozen languages and the clatter of alloy trays. Cadets from 37 species sat at long tables under cold light panels, fueling up between combat drills and astrogation exams. In the corner, isolated by an invisible barrier of unease, Cadet Myra Thorne ate her protein slab with mechanical regularity. She was smaller than most of the beings around her. Pale skin, dark hair pulled tight, eyes that absorbed more than they gave. She had been at the academy for 62 cycles and had spoken fewer words than a Traxian Valkeeper. The other cadets had learned to leave her alone, except one. Drekken Voss shouldered through the crowd like a boulder rolling downhill. A Kragok male, 2.5 meters of dense muscle and bony facial ridges, he moved with the casual arrogance of a species bred on high-gravity death worlds. His uniform strained across his chest. His amber eyes locked on Myra with the lazy focus of a predator that had already decided the prey wasn't worth the chase, but would be fun to bat around anyway. "Human," he rumbled, the word a declaration of contempt. He slapped his tray onto the table across from her, rattling her water bulb. "Still here. I thought your kind would have washed out by now. Too fragile." Myra did not look up. She chewed, swallowed, and took a measured sip of water. Drekken's ridges darkened, a Kragok flush of irritation. He wanted a reaction. The mess hall's ambient noise dipped as nearby cadets tuned into the show. A Xylic intern twitched its antennae nervously. An avian cadet tilted its head. Bullying happened in every academy in the galaxy, but most species had learned to pick on someone their own size. Drekken never had. "I asked you something," he pressed, leaning forward. "Do humans even belong in an officer program? Your bones snap like twigs. Your reaction time is pathetic. I've seen the simulation scores. Still nothing." Myra's fork moved from her plate to her mouth with the precision of a metronome. Something ugly twisted in Drekken's expression. He stood, his full height blocking the light, and circled the table. A heavy hand clamped onto Myra's shoulder and yanked her to her feet. Her tray clattered to the floor. The sleeve of her uniform rode up her forearm, exposing a span of skin covered in dark ink. Drekken paused. His gaze caught the tattoo, a broken longsword held in the jaws of a snarling wolf's head, surrounded by script too intricate for him to read. The lines were sharp, deep black against her pale flesh, and they seemed to drink the light. "What's this?" he snorted, shoving her arm toward a few of his Kragok companions who had gathered to watch. "Primitive scarification. Humans paint themselves like savages and expect us to respect it." He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling into the table edge. "Go ahead, show me what that mark means. Fight back, little human, prove you're not just meat." Myra steadied herself. She pulled her sleeve down over the ink, covering it. When she lifted her head, her eyes were flat and calm, so utterly devoid of fear or anger that Drekken felt a flicker of something he refused to name. "Finished?" she asked. Her voice was soft. It carried. Drekken's lip curled. He wanted to hit her. Academy regulations prohibited physical assault, but Kragok culture respected dominance, and his father sat on the sector's trade council. A few bruises on a nobody human wouldn't merit more than a reprimand. "For now," he growled and turned his back. His friends fell in behind him, laughing. The mess hall resumed its noise, but a current of unease remained. High above the floor, on an observation balcony sealed by privacy glass, Commandant Voss lowered a pair of magnoculars. He was human, gray-haired, with a face carved by decades of war that most of the galaxy had never heard of. His uniform bore no medals, only a single patch, a wolf's head gripping a broken blade. "She carries the ghost's oath," he murmured to the empty room. His fingers tapped once on the railing, a gesture of deep thought. "That Kragok boy has no idea what he's provoked." Below, Myra gathered her fallen tray with steady hands. Her bunkmate Liz, a slim amphibious being with glistening purple skin, hurried over to help. "Myra, that was awful. Are you okay? Why don't you report him?" "There's nothing to report," Myra said. She placed the tray in the recycler and walked toward the exit. Liz hesitated, watching her friend's back. For just a moment, as Myra passed under a harsh light panel, the fabric of her uniform seemed to catch on something beneath it, a texture, a pattern of scarring or ink that spanned her shoulder blades. Then the door cycled and she was gone. Drekken didn't stop. Over the following cycles, the harassment became a ritual. In zero-gravity maneuvering drills, he accidentally clipped her with a training drone and sent her spinning into a bulkhead. During hand-to-hand combat simulations, he partnered with her under the instructor's watchful eye and exploited every opening, throwing her to the mat so hard the sensors flickered red. Each time she rose without complaint. Instructor Relic, a Thraxian with a scarred carapace and a missing antenna, pulled Drekken aside after one particularly brutal session. The Thraxian's voice was a dry rasp. "Cadet Vosh, I've observed your interactions with the human. You are attempting to provoke a response. I advise you to cease." Drekken flexed his knuckles. "She's weak, she doesn't belong here." "I have seen humans fight," Relic said, his multifaceted eyes unreadable. "I have seen what happens when they stop restraining themselves. The ones who are quiet, they are the most dangerous. That female is not weak. She is waiting. I don't know for what, but I would not wish to be present when she finds it." Drekken laughed. The sound echoed down the corridor. "You sound like a nest mother telling ghost stories." Humans are a Class 4 species, barely above the requisition threshold. Their only talent is breeding fast and dying in creative ways. Relic said nothing more. He turned and walked away, his clawed feet clicking on the deck plates. Drekken watched him go and felt a prickle of unease that he crushed beneath a layer of contempt. That night, Drekken found Myra alone in a secondary corridor near the enlisted quarters. The station's day-cycle lighting had dimmed to simulate rest hours. She was carrying a data slate heading toward the library annex. He stepped out of a recessed doorway and blocked her path. "No witnesses this time," he said, his voice low and rough. "No instructors, just you and me." Myra stopped. She tucked the data slate under her arm and waited. Her posture was neutral, hands at her sides, weight balanced. A combat stance disguised as relaxation. Drekken didn't recognize it. He saw only the same infuriating calm that had been gnawing at him for weeks. He wanted to crack it open. He wanted to see fear. His fist connected with her mouth. The blow was fast for someone his size, a straight jab that snapped her head to the side and split her lower lip. Blood welled, a dark trickle against her pale skin. She stumbled one step back, caught herself, and straightened. The corridor held its breath. Myra raised her hand and wiped the blood with her thumb. She looked at it for a moment, then lifted her gaze to meet Drekken's. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky. There was no anger in them, no hatred, only something so profoundly patient that it made Drekken's ridges prickle. She did not speak. She did not move toward him. She simply stood there, blood running down her chin, and waited. Drekken's follow-up punch died in his clenched fist. He had expected crying, cowering, maybe a desperate swing. Not this, not the stillness of deep water. He took an involuntary step backward. "You're insane," he muttered. He turned and strode away, his footsteps heavy on the deck. Myra watched him go. Only when he was out of sight did she touch her lip and examine the damage. Her expression did not change. Liz found her 10 minutes later in their shared quarters, pressing a medicated cloth to her mouth. The amphibious being's large eyes widened in distress. "He hit you. Myra, you have to report it now. This is assault. He could be expelled." Myra shook her head, dabbing at the wound. "Expulsion won't teach him what he needs to learn." "What does he need to learn? That he can do this and walk away." Myra pulled the cloth away and looked at the dark stain on the fabric. "That I was never the one in danger." Liss's skin paled to a nervous lavender. "What does that mean?" Before Myra could answer, the station's emergency klaxon tore through the silence. Amber lights strobed in the corridor. A synthesized voice, calm and relentless, began repeating a message. "Code Omega. Boarding alert. All cadets to designated defensive stations. Code Omega. This is not a drill." The attack came from the outer system, a mercenary fleet that had slipped past the perimeter sensor net using stolen military transponder codes. 3 heavy cruisers and a swarm of boarding craft were already on approach. The Academy station's defensive batteries opened fire, but the enemy had planned the assault meticulously. Myra was on her feet before the second repetition. She pulled on her duty jacket, the motion practiced and fast. "Where are you going?" Liz asked, fumbling with her own gear. "To do what I was trained to do," Myra said. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame, and looked back. "Stay close to your squad. Don't engage anything you don't have to." Then she was gone, a shadow blending into the flashing alarms. The mercenaries hit the docking ring first. Shaped charges blew the outer hatches, and armored figures poured into the station's arterial corridors. They were a mixed-species kill squad, heavily augmented Drav, a pair of hulking Baylor berserkers, and a human renegade leading them with cold efficiency. Resistance from the station's security personnel was immediate and bloody. Cadets, half-drained and terrified, were thrown into the line. Myra's assigned squad held Junction 12, a choke point between the engineering decks and the main reactor. Liz crouched beside her, clutching a plasma carbine with trembling hands. 3 other cadets, a mix of species, huddled behind makeshift barricades. The sounds of fighting echoed through the bulkheads: screams, weapon discharges, the deep crump of hull breaches being sealed. "They're coming," one of the cadets whispered, her sensory fronds quivering. "I can hear them, at least a dozen." Myra checked the charge on her sidearm, a standard-issue pulse pistol, inadequate. She set it aside and pulled a maintenance spanner from a wall rack. Liz stared. "You're going to fight them with that?" "It's quieter," Myra said. Then she moved. The first Drav mercenary rounded the corner with a roar, his 4 arms bristling with blades. Myra met him before he could register her presence. The spanner swung in a tight arc and crushed his primary throat sac. He dropped, choking. She plucked a vibroknife from his belt as he fell and continued forward, flowing into the next enemy. Liz watched, frozen. Myra wasn't fighting, she was dismantling. Every motion was minimal, precise, final. A Baylor lunged at her and she went under his swing, the vibroknife finding the gap between his armored plates with surgical accuracy. He crumpled. The human renegade tried to bring a rifle to bear, but she was already inside his guard. A palm strike to the jaw, a knee to the solar plexus, a twist of his own weapon against his throat. 3 seconds, 4 bodies. The remaining mercenaries hesitated. They had expected scared cadets. They had not expected a ghost. "Hold this junction," Myra told her squad, her voice carrying no more emotion than a navigational prompt. "I'll be back." She stepped over the corpses and vanished into the smoke-filled corridor. 3 decks above, Drekken's squad was dying. He had led them forward aggressively, eager to prove his warrior credentials, and they had walked directly into the mercenaries' main thrust. An armored Baylor with a rotary cannon had cut down 2 of his comrades in the first volley. The survivors scattered for cover, but the mercenaries had them pinned. Drekken crouched behind a shattered support strut, his energy shield flickering, his rifle spent. Blood from a gash on his scalp dripped into his eye. The human renegade commander, a woman with cybernetic optics and a scarred face, advanced through the smoke. She carried a plasma cutter, its emitter glowing white-hot. Her voice was bored. "Kragok Cadet, your species has good bone density. The harvesters pay extra for that. Hold still, this will only hurt for a moment." Drekken snarled and tried to rise, but his leg had been hit. The limb buckled. He could not get purchase on the blood-slicked deck. The plasma cutter descended. He did the only thing left. He opened his comm and broadcast on the all-squad frequency. "Junction 4 is overrun, requesting immediate support. Anyone, we're being slaughtered." Static. The cutter's heat singed his brow. He heard the mercenary laugh. Then a new sound cut through the chaos. A soft thud, a wet snap, and the human renegade's laughter choked into a gurgle. The plasma cutter clattered to the deck. The woman staggered, hands clawing at her throat, where a vibroknife had sprouted like a dark flower. She collapsed. Drekken blinked blood from his eyes and saw a figure descending from an overhead maintenance conduit. Cadet Myra Thorne landed without a sound, her uniform torn, her lips still swollen. Her eyes swept the corridor, cataloging threats, and then she was moving again, the spanner still in her left hand, a stolen rifle in her right. The remaining Baylor swung its cannon toward her. She fired once, a single pulse that took it in the optical sensor. As it roared in blind fury, she closed the distance and drove the spanner into its cranial plate. The giant toppled. Silence fell, heavy and stunned. Drekken stared at her. The human he had punched hours ago, the weak, fragile creature he had tormented for cycles, stood in a ring of broken enemies and did not even seem winded. The fabric of her uniform had torn across her back, exposing a canvas of ink, names, symbols, an intricate mural that seemed to move in the flickering emergency lights. What are you?" he rasped. She turned her head, and for the first time something cold and ancient stirred in the depths of her calm eyes. She did not answer. She simply reached down, seized the collar of his armor, and hauled him to his feet with a strength that should not have been possible. "Can you walk?" Yes, my leg is." "Then move. We're not done." They moved through the ship like a paired predator and its stunned prey. Drekken limped, using his rifle as a crutch, while Myra scouted ahead. She navigated the chaos with an intuition that bordered on prescience, choosing corridors that were empty, bypassing ambush points, anticipating enemy movements before they materialized. At an intersection, a Drav heavy burst from a side passage, weapon raised. Myra pivoted, caught his arm, and redirected his momentum into a bulkhead. The crack of chitin was loud in the confined space. Before he could fall, she disarmed him, field-stripped his weapon, and discarded the pieces. Drekken watched all of this with a growing sense of unreality. He had trained in Kragot combat schools, had wrestled predators on high-G worlds, had been told his entire life that he was the apex of physical capability. The human female in front of him operated on a different plane entirely. A squad of Academy security found them near the command deck. They were exhausted, 2 of them wounded, their sergeant a grizzled Centauri with a plasma-scorched arm. The Centauri took one look at Myra and straightened, his 4 pupils contracting in recognition. "You're the one who's been clearing the lower junctions," he said. "We heard the reports. Single operative, close quarters, 0 survivors. That's Alpha Force methodology." The words hung in the air. Alpha Force. Even Drekken, who considered human military history irrelevant, felt a chill at the name. Alpha Force was a ghost story told in officer candidacy programs across the galaxy, a human special operations unit so classified that its very existence was technically denied. The missions attributed to them were the stuff of nightmares. Planetary evacuations conducted in absolute darkness, enemy commanders found dead in sealed bunkers, fleets that vanished without a distress call. Myra did not confirm or deny. She simply said, "The command deck is vulnerable." Their tactical lead was with the squad I intercepted. That means someone higher up is coordinating from a shipboard station. I need access to the fleet comm array. The Centauri sergeant hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." In the command center, a skeleton crew worked frantically to coordinate the defense. Holographic displays showed the station's layout, red icons marking breach points and enemy concentrations. A human officer with captain's pips was barking orders. When Myra entered, the captain glanced up and froze. "You're Thorne's girl," he said, his voice dropping. "I need the wideband transmission suite," Myra said. "The mercenary command ship is using an encrypted tight beam. If I can spoof their authentication, I can issue a retreat order in their captain's voice." "That's suicide. You need to board their flagship. We have no assault craft ready." "I don't need a craft. I need an EVA suit and a vector." The captain stared at her for a long moment. Something passed between them, a shared knowledge, a weight of history. He nodded once. "Give her what she needs." Drekken stood in the corner, forgotten. He watched as Myra stripped off her torn uniform jacket and pulled on a vacuum-rated combat suit. The motion exposed her back fully for the first time, and the command center's lights illuminated every detail of the ink. It was not just a tattoo. It was a chronicle. Names, dozens of them, written in a flowing human script that spiraled around a central image. A broken longsword, the blade snapped 2/3 of the way down, its shards scattered like stars. Beneath the sword, a wolf's head howled in silence, and around the border a phrase in Old Terran, the letters angular and severe, "Through the fire unbroken, through the dark unbowed." Liz, who had been rerouted to the command deck after Junction 12 was secured, stepped forward with wide eyes. Her amphibious skin rippled through a spectrum of emotional color. "That's the litany of the unbroken," she breathed. "It's from the Alpha Force archives. They say only those who have passed the trials of remembrance are allowed to wear it, they say." "They say a lot of things," Myra interrupted, but her voice was not harsh. It was tired, ancient. She sealed the suit and began checking her oxygen levels. Drekken found his voice. "Whose names are those?" Myra paused, her gloved hand resting on the helmet. When she spoke, every being in the command center listened. "My father's, his squad's, the operatives of Sigma Lance Alpha Force. They died 18 years ago at the siege of Archon's Gate, holding a civilian station against 3 dreadnoughts and a planetary siege array. They won. None of them came back. She lifted the helmet and slid it into place. Her voice crackled through the external speaker, metallic but still impossibly calm. I am Cadet Myra Thorne, daughter of Colonel Aldrich Thorne, the man who burned the Archon's Gate Armada to ash. I wear his oath on my skin, and right now I am going to finish what this day started. She turned toward the airlock and no one tried to stop her. Drekken felt ice grip his spine. The memory of his fist against her mouth was a brand in his mind. He had struck the air of a legend. He had called her mark primitive scarification. He had laughed. The airlock cycled, and Myra Thorne vanished into the void. The mercenary flagship broke orbit 47 minutes later, its crew in a panic. The transmission that had triggered the retreat was flawless, a perfect vocal match to their captain, issuing an emergency withdrawal under the authority of a phantom admiral that Myra had fabricated from fragmentary intelligence. By the time the mercenaries realized the deception, the Academy's reinforcements had arrived. 3 Terran Navy destroyers and a carrier group that had been conducting exercises 1 jump away. The station was battered but intact. Casualties numbered in the hundreds, but the death toll was far lower than it would have been without the cadet defense. Myra was recovered from a derelict cargo pod where she had coasted after her broadcast, her oxygen nearly depleted. She spent 6 hours in the medical bay being treated for vacuum exposure, contusions, and the split lip that Drekken had given her. Drekken spent those same hours in the cadet barracks, alone. His squad had lost 2 members. His own wounds were minor, but something inside him had been broken open. He accessed the Academy's archive terminal with trembling fingers. The siege of Archon's Gate was not classified. It was public history, honored in human space, ignored elsewhere. He pulled up the combat logs, the after-action reports, the memorial footage, and he watched. The footage was grainy, captured by damaged security drones. A civilian station, the Archon's Gate, had been targeted by the Vrex Dominion for strategic elimination. The Dominion had sent overwhelming force. The station's defenders were a mixed garrison of human and allied troops, outnumbered 50-1. At the center of the defense was Sigma Lance. 12 operatives in matte black armor, moving through the carnage with coordinated brutality, and at their head, a man who fought like a force of nature, Colonel Aldrich Thorne. Drekken watched the colonel disable a Vrex heavy tank with a shaped charge and a plasma blade. He watched him board an enemy cruiser single-handedly, the internal sensors tracking his progress by the bodies he left behind. He watched him reach the cruiser's reactor core and set it to detonate, escaping with seconds to spare while the ship cracked apart behind him. The final log entry was a voice recording. Thorne's voice, calm and steady even as fire alarms screamed in the background. Sigma Lance, fall back to the civilian shelters. I'll hold the primary breach. That's an order. A subordinate's voice anguished. Sir, there are too many. You won't. I know. Go tell my daughter I kept my promise. The recording ended in static. Drekken sat in the dark, the glow of the terminal casting harsh shadows across his face. The man who had spoken those words had a face that he could now see in Myra's features. The same set of the jaw, the same winter-gray eyes. He had hit that man's child. He had mocked the mark that honored his sacrifice. The medical bay was quiet when Drekken entered. Myra sat on a recovery bed, dressed in a standard patient gown, a healing patch over her lip. Liz was there, along with a few other cadets who had come to pay quiet respects. They parted when Drekken approached. He stopped at the foot of her bed. His mouth opened, but no words came. The Kragok language had 17 formal phrases for acknowledging a superior warrior, and he could not remember a single one. Myra saved him from his silence. You watched the archives. It was not a question. He nodded, his throat tight. I didn't know, he managed. I didn't know who you were, who he was. Would it have mattered? Her tone was not cruel, merely curious. If you had known, would you have treated me differently because I earned respect or because of my father's name? The question hit him like a physical blow. He had no answer. The restraint I showed you, Myra continued, touching the patch on her lip, wasn't fear, it wasn't weakness, it was mercy. My father believed that violence was a tool, not an identity. He taught me that the strongest weapon is the one you never have to draw. I could have broken your arm in the corridor that night. I could have ended you at any point in the last 60 cycles, but that's not what the oath demands. Drekken's voice was hoarse. Then why did you save me? On the ship, you came for me. Myra looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, because you called for help and because no one else was coming. The simplicity of it shattered something inside him. He lowered himself to one knee, a Kragok gesture that signified the yielding of dominance. A few of the watching cadets gasped. A Kragok kneeling was almost unheard of. I am sorry, he said, the words heavy and unfamiliar. I will carry the shame of what I did. I don't expect forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't mine to give or withhold, Myra said. It's something you earn from yourself over time. Now get up. The deck is cold. He rose, unsteady. Before anyone could speak further, the medical bay's intercom chimed. Cadet Drekken Vosh, report to Tribunal Chamber 3 immediately. Disciplinary proceedings have been initiated regarding your conduct. Drekken's blood chilled. He looked at Myra. Her expression was unreadable. I'll see you there, she said. Tribunal Chamber 3 was a circular room with a high ceiling and a viewing gallery that ringed the upper level. The gallery was half full. Cadets, instructors, and a few civilian staff who had heard rumors about the Kragok who had bullied a human and then been saved by her. Commandant Voss presided from a raised dais, flanked by 2 senior officers, 1 human and 1 centauri. Drekken stood at the center of the circle, a spotlight on his face. The charges were read aloud. Multiple counts of physical assault, conduct unbecoming an officer candidate, and violations of the Academy's interspecies respect protocols. The evidence was damning. Hollow recordings of the mess hall incident, testimony from Instructor Relic about the repeated warnings, medical records documenting Myra's split lip. Commandant Voss's voice was a dry blade. Cadet Vosh, do you have anything to say before this tribunal renders judgment? Drekken looked up at the gallery and saw Myra seated in the front row, Lys beside her. She met his eyes and gave the barest nod. I have no defense, Drekken said. I did everything I am accused of. I believed that strength meant dominance and that dominance meant the right to hurt those I considered weaker. I was wrong. The person I targeted was never weak. She was showing a restraint I didn't understand, and I repaid it with cruelty. Whatever punishment you decide, I accept. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Kragok culture valued pride above all. A public admission of fault was seismic. Voss leaned back. The tribunal will now hear character testimony. We have 1 volunteer. Cadet Myra Thorne, please step forward. Myra rose and descended to the chamber floor. She stood beside Drekken, not across from him. The lighting softened the bruise on her lip. She faced the dais and spoke without notes. I'm not here to defend his actions. What he did was wrong, and he knows it. I'm here to tell you what happened after. She recounted the boarding action, Junction 12, the mercenary commander, the broadcast. She described Drekken's squad pinned and dying and the moment he called for help. She did not embellish, did not dramatize. The facts were enough. When I reached him, he was wounded and unarmed, facing execution. He had every reason to break. He didn't. He kept fighting. And after the battle, when he learned the truth about my family, he didn't make excuses. He came to the medical bay and knelt. I don't know many people, human or otherwise, who can do that. She paused, then unsealed the sleeve of her dress uniform and exposed the tattoo. The wolf and the broken sword gleamed under the chamber lights. This mark carries the names of 12 people who died so others could live. My father was one of them. He didn't die for humans. He died defending a station full of species that had distrusted him, resented him, and in some cases openly wished for his failure. He did it anyway because the oath of Alpha Force doesn't discriminate. Protection is protection. Mercy is mercy. She turned the arm so the tribunal could see the names. I'm asking you to show Cadet Vosh the same thing my father would have shown him. Not exoneration, not a free pass. A chance to learn, to become better than he was. That's what Alpha Force would want. That's what I want. The chamber fell silent. Commandant Voss's expression remained granite, but something flickered in the depths of his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or a shared grief too deep for words. He conferred briefly with the other officers. Then he stood. Cadet Vosh, this tribunal finds you guilty of the charges presented. However, in light of Cadet Thorne's testimony and your own conduct during the station defense, we are imposing a sentence of rehabilitation rather than expulsion. You will be removed from active combat training for the remainder of the academic cycle. You will complete 100 hours of community service within the station's civilian sectors, and you will be assigned to Cadet Thorne as a mentorship partner for interspecies cultural sensitivity training. Drekken's ridges paled, then flushed with complex emotion. He bowed his head. I understand. I accept. This tribunal is adjourned. The gallery emptied slowly. Outside the chamber, Drekken caught up with Myra. The corridor was quiet. Why? He asked. After everything, why speak for me? Myra considered the question. Because you listened. That's rarer than you think. The months that followed reshaped Drekken Vosh in ways his species' harshest training regimens never had. He scrubbed bulkheads in civilian sectors and listened to the families who lived there. He sat through hours of seminars on human history, Kragok cultural blind spots, and the psychology of aggression. And every third cycle he reported to Training Room Delta where Myra Thorne waited. She did not coddle him. Their sessions were brutal, hand-to-hand drills that left him bruised, tactical simulations that exposed every flaw in his Kragok combat thinking. She taught him to fight like a human, not harder but smarter. To use environment, misdirection, and momentum instead of raw strength. To think 3 moves ahead instead of 1. More than that, she taught him why. The philosophy behind the broken sword, the meaning stitched into the litany of the unbroken. She told him about her childhood on a military outpost, learning field medicine at age 8, field stripping a rifle at 10, memorizing the oath at 12. She told him about the night the news of Archon's Gate arrived, and how she had cried for exactly 3 minutes before her mother had taken her hand and said, "Now we carry what he left us." The sword is broken because it shattered against something that should have destroyed it, Myra explained during one session, both of them dripping sweat on the training mat. But the shards are still sharp. The weapon is still a weapon. That's the human way. We break and we keep cutting. Drekken absorbed it all. Slowly his arrogance peeled away, revealing something underneath that was not weak but unfinished. He still had a Kragok's pride, but it was tempered now by an understanding of what real strength looked like. He stopped posturing. He started listening. His instructors noticed. His squad noticed. The academy noticed. The final examination of their cycle was a full immersion combat simulation. The scenario, the siege of Archon's Gate. The simulation chamber was a cavernous room of hollow projectors and gravity manipulators. Myra and Drekken stood at the center, side by side, while the system rendered the burning corridors of the civilian station around them. Enemy drones, programmed with Vrex Dominion tactics, swarmed from the shadows. The objective was simple: hold the primary breach. Myra moved like water, like shadow. Drekken moved with her. They had drilled this rhythm for months. When she went high, he went low. When she flanked, he drew fire. When the enemy pressed too hard, she would say a single word over the comm and he would pivot into a counter-assault that scattered them. It was not perfect. The simulation tagged him twice with shots that would have been fatal, but it was effective. Together, they held the breach until the timer expired and the lights came up. The simulation ended. The observation booth erupted in applause from the instructors who had gathered to watch. Later, as they cooled down in the equipment bay, Drekken spoke. "The broken sword, I think I finally understand." Myra looked at him, waiting. "My people have a similar symbol, a shattered tusk. It means a warrior who has lost everything and still stands. I never understood it before. I thought it was about stubbornness. It's not." He placed his fist over his chest, the Kragok salute of ultimate respect, and bowed his head deeply. "It's about what you become after the breaking. The shards are who you choose to be." Myra was silent for a moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a human gesture, simple and warm. "You're going to make a good officer, Drekken." He raised his head, his amber eyes meeting her gray ones. The old arrogance was gone. In its place was something quieter and far more durable. "I had a good teacher," he said. They walked out of the training wing together into the station's main concourse. The viewport stretched from floor to ceiling, showing the curve of the planet below. Earth, blue and white and impossibly distant, spun slowly in the dark. Drekken stopped to look at it, this world he had once dismissed as a backwater, a cradle of irrelevant primates. "Your father," he said, "would he have been proud of what you did for me?" Myra followed his gaze to the distant planet. Her expression was calm, but there was a depth to it now, an opening that had not been there before. "Believed that anyone could be saved," she said. "Anyone could learn. Anyone could become more than they were. That's why he held the breach. Not because he wanted to kill, because he wanted to give people time to change." She touched her forearm where the ink lay hidden beneath her sleeve. "Yes, I think he'd be proud." Drekken stood with her in the quiet of the concourse, watching Earth turn. Around them, the station hummed with the life of a dozen species, cadets and officers and civilians moving through their routines. Some of them glanced at the odd pair, the massive Kragok and the slight human, and wondered what story could have brought them together. Only a few knew. But the story was spreading, passed in whispers and archive files, a legend still being written. A bully who learned, a ghost who chose mercy, a broken sword that still cut and cut clean. Drekken dropped his fist from his chest and simply stood beside her, a sentinel in training. The silence between them was not awkward. It was the silence of two people who had fought together, bled together, and found something on the other side that was worth keeping. Out in the void, Earth continued its slow and ancient dance, a world that turned pain into legend and legend into hope.